Hello, everyone. So, my name is Marged Trumper, and I'm going to talk to you today about the Hindi language. And I majored in Hindi language many years ago, and I'm presently a lecturer in Hindi language. So, I thought it would be interesting to give my perspective, both as a learner, a long-time learner of this language, and a teacher of this language at the same time. And the topic I have picked is why Hindi could be perceived as easy in a way, and at the same time difficult as well, because it has a very regular grammar, but at the same time Hindi learners find it a bit difficult to actually speak the language. So this has been my experience both as a learner and as a teacher. So I think we can go on, and I will show you a few points I have prepared for you to talk about this topic. And I will actually present on how this language could be the points I have gathered to actually present this language as regular and easy language to learn, and why it could be perceived, and it has been perceived in the past and in the present by learners as a difficult language to actually speak. So, a little bit about me. I have already said a few things. I'm a Hindi lecturer at university here in Italy. I majored in Hindi many years ago in Venice, and nowadays I gathered some experience to actually talk about this topic, both from the perspective of a learner and as a teacher. I have been interested in languages since my childhood, and nowadays my focus is mainly on North Indian languages, and especially on Hindi. So coming to the Hindi language and why it has been attracting interest by foreign learners. It is the main language in India that is being taught as a foreign language in the West. It has many departments and programs in foreign universities for being taught, and it is with English the official language of India. And mainly, it's the most spoken language, especially in the north of the country, with more than half the population speaking this language, either as the first language or as a second language. And it is also the language of one of the most prolific movie industries, also known as Bollywood. And together with its sister language, Urdu, which is originally based on the same, basically on the same language, Khari Boli, could be counted as the third most spoken language in the world. And it's also one of the languages, Indian languages, most spoken abroad, especially in the USA, UK, Singapore, Fiji, Mauritius, etc. So why it has been like fascinating Westerners and foreigners in general as a foreign language to be learned. Economically speaking and culturally speaking, it has been drawing attention because it has some strong fields, especially from the economic perspective. Like it's very strong in IT, healthcare, textiles, etc. Lately, it has also drawn the attention of the West through some global events like the mission on the moon, in 2023, and some Golden Globes given to South Indian movie. South India doesn't speak Hindi that much, but it's by the foreigners, it's perceived as Indian culture in general. And recently we had 3 Grammy Awards to an Indian musician, Ustad Zakir Hussain. Also, traveling to India is a very interesting experience, very sought after by foreigners since a long time. And especially in the last decades, it has become very, more easy. It's easier, of course, to be connected to the rest of the world. So it's one of the experiences that foreigners are more interested in. And after the lockdown, this interest has probably increased. Hindi is also learned as a second language, being a heritage language, especially in the US, UK, and some parts of Europe, especially through the second generation and diaspora students. This has caused foreign universities to open many courses in Hindi language. And other heritage students like spouses of native speakers or adopted children also. One thing that makes Hindi quite interesting to learn is that most of the learners are not too young, but they have a very strong motivation because there's a cultural connection, which is quite important. It's a very vital aspect, as many of you might know, in the language learning experience. So let's come to why Hindi could be perceived. Usually when they ask me, when they come to know that I have been learning Hindi and I teach Hindi, people in the West are quite stricken, and they tell me, oh, such a difficult language. This is the idea people get, maybe because of the script, different script, and the fact it's a non-European language, but they get quite impressed by the fact that I usually answer, it's not that difficult for many aspects. So what makes Hindi easy in a way? The main features I might suggest that make Hindi quite an easy language to learn for European or European language speaking people is that it's an Indo-European language, of course. So as opposed to many Oriental languages, together with Farsi, of course, Hindi and other Indian languages, excluding, of course, the Dravidian and the Southern languages, it's a language that has many verbal and nominal roots in common with European language, many European languages. This makes it a little more familiar with people, for people who actually speak a European language, an Indo-European language in Europe. Another aspect that I find very friendly for learners is the grammar, which is very regular. Almost no irregularities, almost no conjugations to learn by heart. So I won't lie if I say that I never learned anything by heart in Hindi, especially grammar wise. I mean, if I look at the grammar, this is my experience. Another thing that would make Hindi a quite friendly language for learners is the fact that it uses English in a translingual way. This means that English and other actually loan words from other languages such as Farsi, Portuguese. There are different influences from outside languages, but especially English can be used interchangeably with Hindi words or Sanskrit words. So this would make it a very easier experience for those who want to actually speak the language, even at an early age, at an early stage. I mean, what are instead the aspects that could actually make this language perceived as difficult to learn? The experience of learning Hindi might be perceived as hard. These are mainly the aspects I could think of. There's also one thing I might add, that English speakers might find it a little bit more difficult for the pronunciation as opposed to Latin speaking people, like, for example, Italian speakers or Spanish speakers or Portuguese speakers, etc. But this is something specific. Generally speaking, I think one of the aspects that make it more difficult is the SOV structure. SOV structure, if you're not familiar with this concept, it's a language that mainly uses a structure of subject, object, and verb, as opposed to the languages that use a subject, verb, object structure. And I think the SVO languages are more prominent. So this, especially for SVO speakers, this aspect becomes quite difficult when speaking, because actually the structure is inverted, makes the syntax inverted. Especially, it's a problem when it is combined with a passive teaching system. So if the teacher is not prompting the student to actually use the language in practice, the SOV structure will be very difficult to learn, to put to practice. Another aspect is the Indian speakers. Hindi speakers are Indians, of course. So I'm thinking about the mindset. They tend to give little encouragement. And I'm talking about positive and negative aspects, not only negative. So, first of all, they perceive foreigners as English speakers. And in a post colonial mindset, they perceive English as stronger, as more powerful. So they tend to perceive their language as inferior in a way, or less important, let's say so. Uh, at the same time, that they don't want to make others uncomfortable. For example, it's very difficult for Indians to say no directly. At the same time, if you're like a learner and you're a beginner and you try to speak Hindi, they don't want to make you uncomfortable. So they want to encourage you to use the language. They would rather use English, even if they don't speak it that good. Another aspect that makes it hard to learn is the teaching method. And I'm not only talking about the native speaker teachers, I'm speaking in general. So if we have an experience with native speaker teachers, usually they tend to use a traditional method, and they are not taught how to teach Hindi as a foreign language in a modern way. So through some more modern methods. Also, we need to keep in mind that usually Hindi as a foreign language is taught as an academic level, and not as like a beginner language. So this also makes it a bit difficult to teach it as a conversational language. So let's just look at these problems, these features, these points with some more focus. So coming back to the SOV language problem. So one thing with SOV languages, if the learner is an SVO language speaker, usually once they have translating and reading, and also sometimes writing become easier than speaking, because the language is already there. The sentence is there, so we can decide where to focus first and after. But when we have to practically speak and we have to practically understand, we don't decide the structure, and if we don't have it ready, it will be hard to actually speak the language. Recently, I've been told by native speaker, or your Hindi is fluent because you don't wait for some time before replying. And this is one of the aspects that make the actually the native speaker perceive us as a fluent if we don't wait for a long time. If we don't have the structure ready, it will be difficult to be perceived as fluent. So translation and speaking are different, needs different approaches to be taught, and we know that. But with SOV languages, this needs to be dealt with very fast, because it's even more different, even more separate. So it should be taught as a practical language from day one. And since it's not easy, because we always need some time to delve in the language before actually speak it, the presence of a coach would be very helpful in that case, because they could help us use the language from day one without the problem of not being already fluent enough to use the language. So this is a way that would make it easy. Then the teaching method, I have mentioned, it's usually taught in an old style. And this means not only by teachers and by tutors or coaches, but especially by the materials we can find even for self-teaching material available on the market. It's still a little bit not updated for this aspect, even though it's one of the languages that should draw more attention as a learning language. One thing that makes it difficult also is that native speaking teachers, usually Indians are multilingual, but they are multilingual by birth or by background. This means they empathize a little more less with those who start learning a language as beginners. Another question is, Hindi is usually taught to foreigners as an ideal language, in the sense that the conversational language is not taught. And the conversational language is usually a mix of Hindi, Farsi, English. And not only, I'm not saying that using a lot of English words would make your Hindi more fluent or more conversational, but we need to be aware there is practical, real life Hindi, and some teachers, some Hindi native speaker teachers, don't want to actually mention this because it's perceived as a non-correct form of the language. It is not, which is also a problem when we speak to native speakers. This will make it sound like we're talking from a book. And this is a problem with many foreign learners. They tend to learn a language on the book, which is a little different from what is spoken in the street or in a day-to-day life. And the practical approach is less used both by non-native speakers and native speaker teachers, because it's an old style of teaching languages. And at the same time, I think it's something to do with the post-colonial mindset. My experience has been that even with advanced learners, native speaker teachers won't use Hindi as a medium to teach. They would continue using English as a teaching medium, which makes it a bit awkward especially for advanced learners. So what to do to make the conversation practice easier? So if you need to make it more practical and have your Hindi learning experience more practical. So first of all, the best thing would be to search for local speakers, for native speakers who cannot speak English at all or very little English. And this could be achieved in smaller places, little towns, or in traditional settings. For example, I've been exposed to the classical music environment, and especially older musicians. They don't speak English at all. And that has made it easier for me to find non-English speaking locals to talk to me. I even had an experience with a friend who is Italian like me, but she couldn't speak English. For me, English was quite easy at the beginning when I went to India. I thought that maybe using English would be easier because I had the fear not to be understood or not to make myself understood. So if they tried to help me by using English, I was not insisting on having them speak Hindi to me. But with this friend who could not speak English at all, it was easier not to have people speak too much English to me. So I experienced a way that was easier to actually improve my Hindi speaking skills. So there are some ways we have to find some strategies in order to have people speak Hindi to us instead of English. We also need to keep in mind that there's this post-colonial mindset, and the post-colonial mindset is a bit tricky because they have this idea of nationality and they tend to promote their local languages in that sense, but at the same time they perceive their local languages as somehow less powerful than the colonizer language. And nowadays, English is also colonizing in the sense that the culture, especially from America, is perceived as more powerful. So it has doubled the post-colonial mindset. Originally, the local language was even perceived as a way to social resistance, for example, like a kind of jargon. So the colonizer could not speak the language well. So, in a sense, if a foreigner starts understanding and speaking to them in their language, they would feel more vulnerable. So it's not originally thought as a good thing. And another way, they want to practice, especially youngsters, they want to practice English with foreigners. So as soon as they see a foreigner, they will insist in having them speak English to them. So in my teaching experience and my experimentations with methods, I've come across a few possible solutions. First of all, the teaching method should be more practical, and even the teaching material I use, it's not especially at the beginning level, it's not that traditional. I tend to use a lot of images, and I also try to focus more on the motivation of the learner, what makes them learn this language, because it's usually in general, it's key to successful language learning. But with Hindi, it might be even more prominent because, as I said, the learning of this language is very much linked to cultural experience. And I try to help them find new learning strategies according to their preferred way to learning. So, for example, I try to help them find more chances to practice the language, as I have mentioned before. First of all, by searching for people who would practice the language with them naturally, without any constraint or thinking that they would help them using another language, medium language like English. Also, a good conversation coach might be useful, especially at the beginning phase, because the kind of Hindi speaker who would not speak English doesn't have a lot of experience helping the beginner be comfortable or make it easier for them. So it might be a bit frustrating at that stage. So language conversation coach might help in that sense. And not in the sense of like correcting any mistakes. Correcting mistakes can be done as a feedback, but in my experience, the traditional method, especially as used by native speakers, is too much. So it might put off some people. So even like in India, there's the idea that the teacher cannot be in a way judged. So whatever the teacher does should be accepted. And the traditional method even discourages questions by students. So this mindset, sometimes it's still searched by some teachers. So another thing is that it's good to find someone who would practice a real spoken Hindi and not an ideal version of it. Um, the self-teaching is possible in my experience, and I could also mention that we don't necessarily need to actually be in the place to learn Hindi, but we need a good strategy. And if we could find a language coach that would help us be practical from day one, that would be the most useful. But for self-teaching experiences, I would like suggest to get the basics straight away, the easiest way possible, and then start speaking, start trying speaking. What are some of the examples of Indo-European? What are some other examples of Indo-European languages? Are there specific European languages that are more beneficial to Hindi learners? Any Indo-European language, like my first language is Italian. I find many English, even though English is not similar to like Italian, for example, but for Hindi is very beneficial as long as we don't use it as a medium to learn too much. Then Spanish, these languages, any Indo-European language, because through Sanskrit and through Farsi, these languages, we have so many connections. So I would heart in Hindi. We have the word dil, which is from Farsi, but then we have the word hriday. And hriday has the same root as heart in English, but at the same time, it's the same root as cor cordis in Latin, hrd, ऐसे. So I would say we could find so many, like camera, it's a room. Camera in Italian, we say camera, and it's from Portuguese, I think. So there always we could find connections in Hindi. Sometimes I even feel like, oh, this word is so obvious and familiar to me, and I don't know why. So yeah, I would say that. So I would not think there is an Indo-European language which is more beneficial than another to learn Hindi. That's my experience, at least. But for pronunciation purposes, Latin-based languages like Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, that will make it easier for the pronunciation. But for other aspects, any Indo-European language, I would say. As I was saying, self-teaching is possible, but I would make it as practical as possible. So self-teaching for the basics, and then trying to make it practical as much as possible. For example, one strategy I recommend is don't learn just words, vocabulary like that randomly. Learn structures, for example, especially for SOV languages. And if you speak, if you're more familiar with SVO languages, try to learn the structure, because once you have the structure, you can apply it to different examples and situations. Like, for example, I'm showing here a structure, a verb to help in Hindi. And mind you, we have the verb karna, to make, which is connected to the root kr, to crear, creare in Italian, create in English. It means to do, to make. And also the Sanskrit karma. If some people are familiar with the Sanskrit language. So karna, to make, if we combine it with any word, we could like have any verb in Hindi, like to call someone, call karna, to phone someone, phone karna, etc. So madad is a Farsi word. It means help. So madad karna, to help. So we cannot use the verb like this. The structure of this verb is कुछ में किसी की मदद करना, to help someone with something. The traditional old-fashioned way to teach this to a student would be to present the verb and say madad karna means to help. All right. Or if I go to look up the vocabulary, I would find madad karna, but I would not know how to use it. So a teacher would just show a text, a sentence. Even most texts for teaching Hindi are plain text with no images or very, very small use of images. And the sentence, for example, वो उठने में मेरी मदद कर रहा है. More or less, it means he is helping me get up. So I would ask the student to translate the sentence. Once they have translated the sentence, I would tell them, please translate this other sentence, and I would say it in English or any other medium language I'm using, like she helped me cook your meal, for example. And I would expect the student to translate it into Hindi. So I would need to always use a medium language for this. I would not give any reference like a image reference or anything. So like a more modern way would be like I use an image and then I also give a text. So same text, वो उठने में मेरी मदद कर रहा है. Then instead of saying, please translate this sentence in a medium language, even if I'm using a medium language, I would say, please identify the structure of Madad Karna in this sentence. So I would help them identify by themselves what they need to know in order to use that verb practically. Okay. So once they have detected that to help Madad Karna needs like ki before that, ki Madad Karna, because Madad is feminine in Hindi. So I would say to make the help of, and help is feminine. So I would have to say ki Madad Karna. And also with what, I would use me in something instead of with. So once they have detected these features, and this will help them apply the same strategy to other structures whenever they come across anything, I would ask them, for example, to make their own sentence with that structure instead of giving them some sentence to translate. So I might also help them, like suggest them, for example, a verb, an action with which they might want to use to help Madad Karna with an image. So instead of using too much of the medium language. So this might be strategy to teach any language, actually, because it's not just a way we could use, we could teach like SOV languages. But for SOV languages, I feel it's very important to start and avoid too much use of medium language, which is too different in the structure. And this has been my experience, because even when I was learning in an institution, I needed someone to help me practically with the conversation, because it was not too much encouraged in the institution. We were learning mostly about the literature and the grammar, etc. Even outside, many teachers, especially native speakers, had the idea that it was a help to actually use English as a medium, which is maybe true at the beginning. But once we have learned the basics of the language, we really need to start practicing straight away. Otherwise, this structure will never become natural to us. And we will always be perceived as non-fluent while we speak the language. Another question. So let me see. Do South Indians whose local mother tongue is not Indo-European, example Tamil, find it very difficult to learn Hindi compared to North Indians who speak a local tongue that is Indo-European? So first of all, Hindi is, everyone is exposed to Hindi in India because of Bollywood, as the movies. So and the structure, I think even if I'm not wrong, Dravidic languages, the southern languages, non-Indo-European languages, have an SOV structure. So the structure is not that different. But the vocabulary, they have Sanskrit in common, so might have some help with that. The problem is that with pronunciation is they have lots of retroflex as opposed to Indo-European languages. Does learning Esperanto first help with learning Hindi? I'm not familiar with Esperanto that as much to know if it will help with Hindi. But it might be, because I think Esperanto has some, I don't want to say anything which I'm not sure about. Do most language apps teach a commonly spoken version of Hindi? Not all. Sometimes I find very strange sentences. That's why I never suggest people to go there and learn the practical language through apps, because sometimes it's not natural at all. For Hindi, at least, I find this problem. Or sometimes there's the idea of the language is like some apps will have sentences that are based on the European Western lifestyle. So they want me much useful in India on a daily basis. That's what I can actually say according to my experience. Because the lifestyle in India is very specific. So we need to have the vocabulary for that kind of lifestyle, at least if we are using the language locally. So we might, like bargaining. Bargaining is something which is done in some countries, not all. So there are some vocabulary, some parts of the vocabulary which needs to be cultural specific and cannot be too general. So if someone has asked about the Dravidic languages, I wanted to go back to that question. So for example, me as a learner of North Indian languages, I don't find much similarity with Dravidic languages. So in my experience, I've come across like sentences. I tried learning something from Dravidic languages, and I found it so different, both for the pronunciation and the vocabulary and all. I'm not sure about grammar, because that is specific to any language. Even in India, some Indo-European languages are different from each other, so that doesn't make any kind of rule. But just by listening to Hindi, it won't be easy to understand any Dravidic language, and the opposite also works. So I would say the only thing is that they're quite exposed to Hindi through the culture, not connected to that different culture. So they want to be recognized for their own culture, and Hindi for them is like any other foreign language, but they're very much exposed to the culture of that language, especially through the movies. And let's not forget, the capital of India is in the north. So they will be exposed to that culture much more than any other foreigner. And they have it at school also as a subject, I think. So somehow, not because of the language itself, but culturally, they're exposed to the language. Any other question? Okay, so okay, do you think learning Hindi is necessary, useful for travel? It's vital. It's vital, especially if you want to stay for a longer period and you're traveling alone. Of course, if you travel to South, Hindi is not that vital. English is more useful because Hindi, they will, even if they understand you, they will pretend they're not understanding you in Hindi. It's a bit strange, but especially if you're in the north, for small things, like for example, if you have to do with locals, small services, bargaining, all these things, people who provide these kind of services, they don't speak English. So even if you want to, like, say, order something from an app, like food or anything, they will call you up and they will speak to you in Hindi. Of course, if you speak English, they might be like they might try to speak English as well, but it's also like, if you speak Hindi, they perceive you as more smart, street smart, and they won't ask you, for example, they won't charge you more money just because you're a foreigner. I am never quoted foreign fees, for example, foreign prices, because I use Hindi. Okay, so this talk, my time is over. It has been a pleasure to talk to you about Hindi and to like being exposed to your questions, and very good experience for me to also learn and reflect more on my journey into Hindi, and hope to talk to you some other time and interact with some of you in these days of the Polyglot Gathering. Thank you.